Hey, you guys come down. We need you guys to mic up. So. Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, I forgot to do that. Okay. I don't know how I missed. They're down there somewhere. Oh, there's other things plugged into your plug. Like the confidence monitors. They weren't built.
Okay. Maybe I can share a plug?
I think when you go on, they light up.
I feel like I'm at the UN. They're going to be translated into multiple languages.
Is there any ability for me to share a plug with you guys?
The confidence monitor stuff is in that plug. So you might have to. Well, are you near empty or not? Not one
No, but maybe I. Honey, can you look under your thing? Yeah, these are nothing on my thing.
Okay, we should.
Or maybe you have to a little less.
We're gonna make a note. It always happens every year, but make sure you wear clothes. Women, right?
None of us
I know.
Actually, I do
That's the only missing judge. Yes, perfect. Hi, Bridget. How are you? What? Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I think we just go over here. Okay. Yep. Go. Get all your weird mouth noises out of the way. That might give off. I'm like a wiggly person. Oh, me too. I'm so fidgety. Yeah. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 John Edwardson 72 Social New Venture Challenge Finals. We are so excited to be back in person and live streaming this event. I'm Rob Gertner. I'm a professor here at Chicago Booth and the John Edwardson Faculty Director of the Rustandy Center for Social Sector Innovation. This is the 12th annual Edwardson SNVC Finals, which the Rustandy Center hosts together with the Polsky Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. The SNVC is the social impact track of the University of Chicago's nationally ranked business launch program, the New Venture Challenge. Few people to thank today. Today we extend special thanks to our title sponsor, John Edwardson, a Booth alum, university trustee, and retired chairman and CEO of CDW, as well as co-chair of Advance Illinois, a statewide education organization. Year after year, the Edwardson Social Entrepreneurship Program equips UChicago students and faculty with tools to connect research and practice and go from idea to impact. As the cornerstone of that program, the SNVC empowers students to conceptualize, develop, and launch new ventures with a focus on social impact and a model for financial sustainability. Since 2011, the SNVC has helped jumpstart more than 150 companies and nonprofits, which have gone on to raise more than $165 million in philanthropic dollars, grant support, and venture capital funding. This year marks a number of milestones for SNVC alumni teams, both the first merger and the first acquisition of SNVC teams. Luminate, the winner of the 2012 SNVC, was acquired by Adventure Ready Brands to scale their business and humanitarian work and to reach more people around the world. AIM Clinics, the winner of the 2018 SNVC, announced a merger with Hope Bridge to bring ABA therapy, the gold standard in autism therapy, to more than 100 clinics serving under-resourced communities in 12 states. Wasoko, the second place winner of the 2013 SNVC, had the name Project SAM at the time, just raised $125 million and was named by the FT as Africa's fastest growing business. So we're excited to see the enduring impact of SNVC teams and know that today's teams have the same potential to address pressing issues in society. Judges will have their work cut out for them as they hear from our 7 finalists. This year we had a record-breaking 20 teams that were in the class, with students from Booth, Harris, Crown, Pritzker School of Medicine, the college, and social sciences. It was the deepest year ever, and there are many great ventures that are not even among the 7 finalists that you will see today. All SNVC teams took my New Social Ventures class, where they received coaching on everything from financial models to impact measurement, and honed their pitches by presenting to faculty, social entrepreneurs, domain experts, foundation officers, and philanthropists. Teams today are competing for $175,000, another record, in startup capital, including our Audience Choice Award. Please be sure to vote for your favorite team online. Videos will run during our lunch break, during judge deliberations, and can be viewed online. A note about today's schedule: we will take a short break after the first 2 presentations, break after the next 2 for lunch, and then return for the final 3 pitches in the afternoon. For those on the live stream, don't worry, the results will be live streamed as well. One note for the judges: please, when you ask questions, use the microphones. You tap them to turn them on and tap them again to turn them off, and a little light will light up when your microphone is on. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone here for joining us today, and everybody on the live stream, and for your support of social entrepreneurship at UChicago. I want to give a special thanks to our SNVC sponsors, our title sponsor, John Edwardson, our platinum sponsors, Ron Tarson and Steve Tarson and David Wells, our gold sponsors, 4S Bay Partners, Jim, thank you, David and Rosemary Good, David, thank you, Dresner Partners, and Barnes and Thornburg, who are our legal sponsors, and Optiver. Thanks also to our distinguished judges who are here today, both who are here in the classroom, as well as the coaches and mentors, and all of the judges and others who helped throughout the quarter. Let's thank them. It'll take too long to have each of the judges provide introductions on themselves, but you can learn more about our judges and finalists online, and there it is. Oh, that's, if you get rid of the ACA on that link, you can get to the judges' bios. And we are actually a minute early, but that means we're on time. So we're ready for our first team, Counselors for America.
Kids across the country are in mental health crisis. Nearly 1 in 2 high schoolers reported feeling persistently sad and hopeless during the last year. The CDC has seen youth emergency department visits for mental health increase 31% during the pandemic. My name is Prachi, and I'm the founder of Counselors for America, joined by my incredible teammates Audrey, Ashley, and Emily. I come to this work as a middle school educator from an underserved community, where the vast majority of my students were surviving poverty and brought deep traumas into my classroom that I was professionally untrained to support them through. My experience is not unique. Teachers are often overburdened in this way because there aren't enough mental health clinicians to serve the general student population. Schools are our most potentially powerful line of defense for students in mental health crisis, but they're vastly under-equipped to provide services at the scale and intensity students require. I had a student named Julia who had a very sick family member. Her parents couldn't speak English, and she often had to do a lot of the medical translation for the family. She would sit expressionless in my morning homeroom. I had no idea what to say to her. The dominant models of mental health in schools don't work. Since there aren't enough mental health clinicians, we rely on problematic referral systems that only flag kids for help when they're behaving badly, when in reality there's so many more kids like Julia who need help. Counselors for America offers a nonprofit model combining sustainable clinician recruitment, Medicaid billing, and administrative support to build in-school wraparound mental health systems to support low-income kids grades 6 and up. Our program has the potential to help 200,000 children in aggregate by year 10, placing 6 times more clinicians than currently exist to do this work. And the good news is we've already begun this process in a pilot program at my former school in the Bay Area.
CFA clinicians will give all students a strengths and difficulties screener. These screeners are best practice according to the American Pediatric Society, and schools are a great resource to provide these screeners, but don't have the services to follow up. CFA ensures there are enough clinicians to not only administer the screeners, but be able to determine which students need therapy and to provide that therapy. Not all students will need therapy, and those that don't will still benefit from having trained professionals on their campus, as the purpose is really to improve school climate and culture, make all the existing services work better so all kids feel seen and cared for. On the clinician-facing side, in the vein of Teach for America, we're looking to serve as a recruiting agency between clinicians and schools. In differentiating ourselves, Counselors for America will recruit trained masters in clinical programs and place them at schools in their region. We found in our customer discovery process that many graduates are interested in school-based work, but are dissuaded due to high licensure costs, around $30,000. Much of this cost comes from required clinical supervision, which CFA will provide and pay for to improve clinician retention and training in the field. We've already found success with this incentive in our pilot program. So each day, CFA clinicians will collaborate across all of our stakeholders. As a social worker who has worked in schools, I have firsthand experience into how important this collaboration is. Our model here at CFA is not just therapy happening in a remote corner campus. It really is infusing mental health into everything that's already ongoing on campus. This includes push-in classroom support for teachers, lunchtime groups, dedicated pull-out time for therapy, and trust building with families and teachers on behalf of the schools. Making the clinician a visible presence on campus is crucial for normalizing mental health services and helping students feel more seen and seeking support.
So how do we make this happen? For each clinician, we expect to pay $87,000 per year, which will cover their salary, benefits, supervision, billing, and licensure. We'll fund this through a combination of school budgets and Medicaid billing. Schools will ask to pay 25%. There's a version of this working in Santa Clara County today where schools are asked to pay 50%, which has helped ensure administration buy-in. Medicaid covers therapy for kids who need it and reimburses $60 per 45-minute session. With this, we expect that our clinicians will be able to bring in about $69,000 per year based on their sustainable rate of billing in 60% of their time. This gives us $4,000 per clinician that we can then reinvest to offset some of our overhead costs. To enable billing by next spring, we'll follow the steps outlined here to set up this billing infrastructure. And once we're familiar with managed care contracting, this whole process will take only about 6 months as we enter new states. Bringing in billing revenue and hiring more clinicians will dramatically reduce our overhead costs and reliance on philanthropy within our first few years of operations. We don't need massive scale to get there. We see huge improvements by year 3, including bringing overhead below 15%, which is the gold standard. And in year 4, with 50 clinicians, only 6% of our overall spending will have to be supported by philanthropy and grants, which means that we can extend that funding for 16 times the impact. CFA magnifies the impact of all sources of funds. Schools can afford 4 clinicians for the cost of 1. And this is possible while acting as an attractive employer who is fairly compensating our clinicians.
Now that you've seen our model, I'm going to be talking about what we've done so far and how we intend to grow over the next 10 years. So as of today, we've already raised $35K from Polsky accelerator programs, the Obama administration, and private donations. Our pilot program at Prachi's KIPP school in the Bay Area has already treated 8 children who had previously never received therapy. We've interviewed over 110 mental health clinicians, school leaders, policymakers, and researchers. And finally, we just received fiscal sponsorship from Inquiring Systems, Inc., which means we now have 501(c) status. Over the next 10 years, we intend to grow school by school and state by state. Always keeping our focus on schools with low-income populations, we're starting with charters because they have the flexibility to budget for and hire clinicians with different licenses and offer built-in opportunities for scale. Our pilot partner, KIPP, is the largest national charter network in the country and will leverage this sphere of influence to continue to penetrate charter school systems. We'll prioritize schools that have a high number of students enrolled in Medicaid. After solidifying our model, we'll approach traditional public schools, first in smaller to mid-sized districts with an appetite for innovation, and finally in major urban districts. As we expand, we'll filter our partnerships through an application process to ensure that there's buy-in from school leaders. For the first 3 years of our growth, we'll continue to build our programs in California, leveraging our charter school network to serve over 3,000 children. After California, we'll focus on states which have high Medicaid reimbursement rates and broad support for mental health services. We'll be tracking our progress in terms of clinicians staffed over the status quo. So by year 10, we expect CFA to have placed nearly 600 clinicians where previously there were less than 100, bringing care to over 200,000 students. With all of this work, first and foremost, we aim to help our students, schools, and clinicians. We'll be assessing impact through qualitative and quantitative metrics. For students, we want to see that the therapy is working, which we'll track through pre- and post-treatment assessments. Long term, we want kids to feel greater confidence in their relationships with themselves and their school and their peers. These are outcomes that we're already seeing in our pilot program. For schools, we expect to impact school culture, build trust with families, and retain staff longer since teachers no longer have to be everything for every student. And the support that we provide clinicians will help them complete licensure, encourage them to stay longer, and eventually build a diverse and larger workforce of school-based mental health clinicians.
Operating at the intersection of public education and healthcare comes with its risks. With Medicaid billing, the saying goes, you figure out Medicaid in one state, and you know Medicaid in exactly one state. So expanding is going to be challenging, but proving our capabilities in California will set us up to succeed in other places. The administrative burden introduced by billing can take precious time from clinicians without the right support. Investing in the right software will help us lessen this burden and ensure that student data is protected within HIPAA and FERPA. And in terms of the regulatory environment, liability is top of mind. So we've chosen a fiscal sponsor who can guide us. These might be thorny challenges, but our organization can tackle them. We've identified an executive director to join our team. Marissa is a licensed clinical social worker in California with the right operational expertise to build our model on the ground. I will be in an advisory, strategic, and fundraising role as president and chair of the board. And this January, I'll be joining BCG's public sector consulting practice to build my own expertise so that I can return full-time to CFA in 2 years, ready to expand to new states. In our first 2 years, only Marissa and our on-the-ground clinical staff, Olivia and Patricia, will be paid, since we want to prioritize sending our resources to kids and clinicians first. Once we reach critical scale in years 3 and 4 and look to expand outside California, we'll be able to add more leadership to our payroll. Our team at KIPP will stay on, as will my SNVC team in joining the Working Advisory Board. Additionally, we're supported through advisors through the networks that I've been privileged to be a part of through Fulbright, KIPP, public policy at Harvard, and as an Obama scholar here at UChicago. With our pilot coming to an end this school year, we're raising $246,000 to give us a 2-year runway to build our Medicaid infrastructure and reduce our dependence on philanthropy. The amount will fund 5 full-time mental health clinicians by year 2, as well as our executive director. As children across the country are processing all kinds of unspeakable tragedies, COVID, violence, war, now is the chance to step into the tremendous urgency of this moment. Kids need more support from their schools than they're currently getting. Your early investment will help us prove a model that all schools can use in America to provide mental health services to every student who needs them. Join us. We welcome your questions. Please.
So I so applaud the work that you've done, because I think putting mental health clinicians into schools is a huge, huge step to solving the problem that you've identified. My big question is, what's the innovation here? This is really a recruiting agency, and there are other analogies like nurse, outsourcing agencies. So what do you consider the most innovative thing that is part of your venture?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to pass it over to Audrey to talk about how we are different from what exists currently.
Yeah, great question. So thinking about where we're innovative, our innovation really comes from the sustainability of our model. Right now, we're not seeing schools do this because Medicaid billing is extremely complex, and we hope that by leveraging this billing, we'll actually be able to build something that's financially viable for them and allows these low-income schools access to our programs. The second component of that is really the clinician pipeline. So in conversations that we've had with existing programs, we've seen that they've had a lot of difficulty staffing clinicians, and since we're going to be very proactive about our outreach, we're hoping that we can solve that problem as well.
Okay. Question. So the counselors will be your employees rather than the school systems. And my sense is, from a reasonable amount of activity in the school systems over the last 11 or 12 years, this will work well in charter schools, and in particularly where they have no labor unions. In public schools, my guess is the teachers' unions will want your counselors to be a member of their union. Is that down the road a long way, or how do you think about addressing this issue?
It's a really wonderful question, and I'm also going to pass that one over to Audrey to talk a little bit more about our process of getting into district schools.
Yeah, so I'm just going to give us a second to get to the slide. All right, so when we look at getting into public schools, like we've talked about, that's going to be sort of phase 2 of our growth. And that is because, like you've said, there are a lot of challenges with approaching district schools, and we want to make sure that our model is tight before we start having those conversations. When we look at how we might start to build relationships, some conversations that we've had today with school administrators in Chicago indicate that we should first and foremost be looking at schools that have prioritized mental health. So that means looking at school boards, figuring out who's having these conversations and how we can be a part of that and how we can be additive in that space.
Great, thank you, Sunny. Yeah, I have a question on the clinician side, because there is just a shortage of clinicians, period. So could you talk a little bit more about, just because I know you covered licensure costs, but like what are the dynamics and what are the other options available to clinicians, and how does that play into your ability to gain supply of counselors?
Absolutely. I'm going to pass that over to our resident social worker, Ashley, to talk a little bit more about our recruiting process and the work that we've done there.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're 100% correct. There is a clinician shortage out there. So we're not really looking to build an extensive pipeline. We're really looking to work within the systems already in place here. So based off of, since we started our pilot and we're looking to start in the Bay Area, we really looked at master's programs and did deep research into the programs that are happening out there, as we're really looking to hire clinicians from the community to serve our schools. So from there, there's 12 master's programs that would be able to funnel into school-based practice. Of those 12 programs, there's 150 graduates that graduate from each program each year. So we're looking at about 1,800 graduates per year there. We're really only looking for about 3 to 4 clinicians per school that we're looking to serve. And because we're talking about covering their supervision, which we're anticipating to take about 2 years, And then in addition to that, we're asking that our clinicians stay on staff for at least 3 additional years. We're not looking to rehire every year for each of our schools. So although there is a clinician shortage, we're really not anticipating that we're gonna find it that difficult because we're having this supervision component to it that is difficult for a lot of people interested in school-based social work to find and to cover, as well as providing salaries that are livable wages for our clinicians. And then your second part of your question was just asking about different avenues that clinicians could also go.
Yeah, I mean, just like, why would I go to a school versus private practice or to a health system? Just
you know, it's individual preference. I know in my program there's a lot of individuals, and I can pass it over to Audrey here in a second to talk about the clinicians we've talked to about this. There are clinicians that are looking to work in the schools and who do have that desire to do it, but go the private practice route because in general it's more lucrative for them and they're able to gain that supervision component that they're not able to gain if they do it in a school. But I'll pass it over to Audrey to talk a little bit more about our survey that we conducted.
Yeah, so we actually had a lot of the same questions that you did. And we put out a survey. Unfortunately, we launched it Memorial Day weekend, so we're still waiting for responses to come in. But we've had 10 respondents so far among clinicians, master's students, and school-based clinicians specifically that indicate some barriers to entry in the field are around the low salary, high burnout rates, and the prohibitive cost of licensure. So we're continuing to test the assumptions that we've made and what will attract and retain talent to our programs. And as we get that data, we're hoping to adjust accordingly.
Thanks.
You asked my question.
Okay. Please.
So how do you see this program interacting with the special ed programs that are already at schools, and what do you expect to have any challenges in dealing with the special ed teachers?
Great, I'll be happy to answer that question. So we are seeing this as a general education intervention, and actually our long-term vision is to do systems transformation. So we aim to partner with advocacy organizations that are already in this space advocating that we need more mental health services for our kids, and we'll be able to ride on their lobbying infrastructure to support legislation that's already in place in states and in the federal government to be able to push this further. The closest analog that we can think of here is free and reduced federal lunch. So just the way if you have over 75% of your school that lives at 130% of the federal poverty line, a school automatically receives funding for breakfast and lunch. We hope to institutionalize mental health funding in the same exact way. And so we see ourselves as being really additive to special education services. The saying goes in education, if you sort of plan for the edge cases, it's better for all students. And so that's how we sort of will work in tandem with special education supports to make sure our interventions are universal and comprehensive for building mental health in schools. Please.
So I know there's a couple of nonprofits that do something similar, but in particular, I thought if you could talk about a little bit how communities in school, they do also put clinicians in the classrooms, but they have a whole wrapper around the program so that they also bring in other services from other nonprofits on the premise that mental health is a complex issue and it's not just down to the clinician.
Absolutely.
Right, and so, but the hardest part of their program to build out has been the clinician component.
Yes.
Because of recruiting and other issues. So can you talk a little bit about how you, and so that's why the other parts of communities in school has grown so much. Can you talk a little bit about how you view them and how you would be different?
Absolutely, really happy to. At every step in this process, we see ourselves as being additive. And I'm going to pass it over to Audrey in a second to double click into the specific research she's been doing in Santa Clara County around these wellness models. But just in general, when it comes to understanding how we work in tandem with wraparound services, we are partnering with schools to set up the right systems for mental health to succeed. As Ashley mentioned, it's not just mental health in a remote corner of campus. We're also working with administrators to set up the right data systems to make sure that student mental health information is collected, it's protected, it's understood and analyzed so that it can inform school climate and culture. And so Audrey has some insight here into Santa Clara County in particular.
Yeah, so we've been doing some preliminary research and having conversations with administrators in Santa Clara County specifically because we see that as an early entry point. That's where our pilot's operating right now. And they, like you mentioned, have a series of programs that address mental health specifically in schools. And so we wanted to learn from them, how can we help you? The conversations that we had taught us that in this county specifically, they're asking for schools to cover 50% of the costs of clinicians, whereas we're covering 25%. They're only able to provide one clinician who covers multiple schools, and we hope to cover one clinician per grade in a single school. We're also working with them to figure out exactly what services they provide and how we can provide either slightly different services or cover some of the gaps to make sure that we're truly working together to build, like you said, a community.
Could you talk about your executive director, where you found her commitment to the program?
Absolutely. She's actually joining on the live stream right now. I wish. Hi, Marissa. We found her through our networks. So I have one of my advisors at Harvard is an ed school professor there. He's connected to a lot of clinicians and practitioners in the field. He helped me blast a job description. We got a few candidates out of it, and Marissa was really the top one who we felt completely aligned with our mission and brings absolutely the right expertise, having worked at in coordination services across a wide variety of contexts. She's an adoption specialist. She's started her own private practice successfully in LA. She has relationships with schools. We really think she's the right person to be building out our model in California.
Did she say, why didn't I think of this? Or what?
No. She's laughing right now, I know that. No, she has thought of this. That's the thing. Anybody who's in schools right now knows we need more clinicians. I mean, look at the headlines. Every other headline in the New York Times or Washington Post is about how current school social workers are completely overwhelmed. 94% of them in a New York Times survey recently found that their students were exhibiting tremendous anxiety and depression more so than before in the pandemic. And so Marissa's thought when she found us was, this is what I've been wanting to do all along. Thank you for starting this work. I'm happy to be part of the process. And so for me as a leader, that's what this is about. I'm a teacher by trade. I believe in growing people around me. And an organization that's trying to do the work that we're trying to do should not depend on just one person to sustain itself. We need to work in communities, and we need all of us to be bringing our best selves to this work. And Marissa's the right person to rally the troops in that way.
Slightly different question, more along the lines on the branding. I'd like your thoughts on using CFA, which as a business person, I'm constantly thinking about the Certified Financial Advisor. They've got a lot of money behind it and so forth. So can you talk a little bit about your thoughts there, and might there be some confusion in the market?
It's a great question. I'm happy to take this one. Really, the namesake we hope to invoke is Teach for America, so TFA. And the thinking there is that TFA did incredible work with building the teacher pipeline and introducing new diverse teachers of color into the workforce. That's what we're trying to do with Counselors for America as well. Over 80% of counselors in schools are white, and the students we hope to serve are children of color. So it's very important for us to be building this kind of access into this profession, because we know it matters to have somebody serving you who looks like you. And so that's really what we hope to invoke here. I guess it's a good note to do different branding and positioning in the market to make sure that the image is kids, not financial documents. Yes.
I was actually wondering if you could spend a couple of minutes talking about the clinical outcomes you've seen in your pilot, and in particular, the fact that you're mostly employing and working with recent grads. Are there tools, training, technology, things that you're going to give them to track outcomes over time and really measure that in the kids that they're working with?
And we're so happy you asked this. We're really excited to talk about our pilot results. Go ahead, Ashley.
Yes, we can talk briefly. I know we're coming up on time here, so I will be mindful of that for the next group. But as far as our pilot study goes, so we ran a pilot study over the last 12 weeks here. And as far as our outcomes go, so the pilot study was run in one classroom with 32 students. We really wanted to do active consent, where the norm is actually passive consent, so opting out of services. But we wanted to see what the appetite for mental health was in this school, and to be able to understand within this population, okay, what do we need to do moving forward as far as building trust goes. So we only got 12 active consents back, and from there, 8 qualified for therapy services, and were actively in service for these past 12 weeks. From those 8, we saw a 60% reduction in symptoms from our universal screener that we provided pre and post, which is amazing in such a short amount of time. That is like really fantastic numbers, whereas other numbers we've seen is a 50% reduction over a year. And 100% of these students were viewed to have pro-social behavior increases and feelings of self-belonging within the school based on self-reporting. So as far as what kind of our key learnings from that pilot have looked like and working with the kids here, we really are very excited about the next phase and really focusing in on that trust component now, trust for the schools, trust with parents, and trust with the kids to be able to provide more mental health services to the community.
We are now out of time.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Please join me in welcoming our next team, Aloe Points.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Adarsh Kumar, co-founder and CEO of Aloe Points. Aloe Points is a social commerce app that makes sustainability accessible and fun. My co-founder and CTO, Sloane, will be joining us for Q&A. Climate change is the existential crisis that unites all of us. So what are we doing about it in our day-to-day existence? Here's just a sample of solutions we have access to. Chances are each of us could add a few more of these into our day-to-day lives. So why is it that despite our high climate awareness, we aren't embracing these solutions quickly enough? Well, the first roadblocks are simply knowing what to do and how. Existing calls to climate action often take a one-size-fits-all approach that can be overwhelming to maneuver. There's no structure provided to embed these solutions into our day-to-day lives. But there's really this question of why bother? In the face of global warming, our individual actions feel minimal, depleting our motivation. But the IPCC, the foremost authority on climate change, has made it clear. Behavioral change is a necessary component of our collective climate fight. In fact, a reasonably scaled adoption of behavioral changes can reduce entire regions' carbon footprints to the tune of 25%. Going a layer deeper, our lifestyle choices matter because they have the power of underpinning system change itself. AlloPoints is a social commerce app that harnesses our ability to make a difference in 3 ways. It provides a gamified approach to sustainability action, it creates a community that's powered by social change, and it offers sustainable incentives through our business partners. Say you download your soon-to-be favorite app, AlloPoints. Here's what that journey looks like. It begins with the personalization questionnaire that allows the app to understand your behaviors and preferences and provide a data-driven roadmap that meets you where you are in your sustainability journey. So your first mission today is the food waste reduction mission, which is a highly impactful climate solution. The app reframes information into engaging and action-oriented challenges that walk you step by step to achieve that larger sustainability goal. The first challenge here is spoiler alert. As a quick spoiler, this is a crash course on food date labels, which demystifies it for households and helps them reduce their food waste. Completing this and follow-on challenges earn you gamified Allo points, thereby inducing motivation and instant gratification. These points are also proportionate, roughly, to the environmental impact of each challenge. At Allo Points, we recognize that social change has to be social. Studies have established that social interactions and norms are key drivers of pro-environmental choices. For example, a household getting solar panels usually incites many others to get solar panels and mimic this first household. At Allo Points, we empower each user to inspire their network into climate action by sharing their gamified accomplishments through group-based contests and by facilitating climate discourse. To make Allo Points accessible to all, our app will be free to end users, and our revenue comes in 3 forms. The first is an affiliate commission, where we connect our users to make purchases of sustainable products and services, such as a subscription with the Urban Canopy, a Chicago-wide composting pickup provider. We charge an affiliate commission to the business. The second comes from challenges that are sponsored by businesses. For example, Eco and the Flamingo, Chicago's first zero-waste retail chain, can sponsor challenges that are associated with their mission, thereby raising brand awareness strategically. They can also sponsor rewards-based incentives to incentivize more foot traffic to their stores. The third revenue pipeline comes from employers who today face growing calls to be more sustainable. Allo Points gives them the tools and the opportunity to engage their workforce on sustainability initiatives. Now, all 3 partners you saw on the previous screens are Allo Points partners. To that end, I'm really pleased to announce that we have letters of intent with 8 businesses and organizations at the forefront of sustainability. We're creating some of our sponsored and affiliate challenges in our upcoming pilot with them. We also have an additional 2 letters of intent with Chicago-based employers. The best part of all this is that we found this traction before even launching our fully fledged product. We also received informal interest from large entities, such as last week, a 1,000-person law firm indicated their interest to beta test our app once it's available. We've also recruited a waitlist of 154 end users directly. Now, we're looking to integrate these stakeholders during our pilot testing of our web-based mobile app that we'll be launching by the end of this month. To inform this minimum viable product, we've held 3 experiments so far with the goal of informing individuals and motivating them to pursue behavioral changes, which is the hardest challenge Allo Points is striving to solve. We started with a newsletter that shared our native eco-labels through humorous writing. While we maintained consistently high readership, we were not satisfied with this because the medium was not able to facilitate a growth in knowledge to a growth in reported actions. So we tested out a series of challenges in the form of 7-day challenges through a social chat platform. We instantly saw more responses, more reported actions because of the gamification setup that we had. Now, to introduce more personalization and agency into the mix, we ran some challenges in person at a fair trade pop-up 3 weekends ago. My favorite story comes from this event, and is that of Wendy. She wanted to begin composting, but couldn't find a solution that worked with her building's rules. So we leveraged information about her zip code and her personal preferences, and we recommended Lomi, which is a $500 composting machine, which she actually ended up getting. Therefore, showing AlloPoints' approach is already inducing behavioral change. Now, we're acquiring our initial user base through grassroots efforts. A key pillar of the strategy is our partners themselves, who have deep relationships with the sustainability-forward customers that they serve. They've been hosting us for in-store demos and eagerly promoting us on their social media platforms. That's because they're looking to leverage AlloPoints to engage their current customer base and also acquire new ones through cross-pollination from a growing ecosystem of other business partners. A large chunk of our current waitlist actually comes from these customers, and we're looking to incorporate them more aggressively, especially as we look to onboard 16 more partners over the next 6 months, which is in line with our current business acquisition rate. Now, we'll be incorporating these users' feedback, especially as we iterate on our web-based mobile app and look to launch a dedicated mobile app in our second phase. Here, we'll be focusing on Chicago-based employers as a way of scaling up. Now, while we get access to their employees, employers are looking to use AlloPoints for 2 reasons. The first is to instill a culture of sustainability into their workforce, which is becoming ever more important in retaining talent these days. The second is to help with tracking and reducing emissions, especially those that are associated with employees' decisions. We've also received great interest from large national employers such as LinkedIn. Their green teams are really eager to use what AlloPoints is promising. In fact, one of our advisors is from LinkedIn's Go Green team leadership, and he's giving us great advice on how we can build a product that can help his team engage thousands in their workforce. Now, our analogs have shown the path to achieve scale and impact in their respective domains. Strava's social features make exercise motivating for its millions of users. Duolingo's interactive gamified design converts language learning to something that's fun and exciting for everyone. AlloPoints, similarly, is vying to change our culture that introduces harmony with our environment. With that vision and our baseline launch strategy, our goal is to reach 1 million users by year 3 and 9.5 million users by year 5. Now, when we model the lifetime value of our end users for each year, we project them to rise, driven by 3 reasons. The first is a stable source of revenue from employers that takes off starting in year 2. As we onboard more partners, there will also be more sponsored challenges and opportunities for affiliate revenue for our end users. And finally, we look to decrease our projected monthly churn from 50% in year 1 to 10% in year 5. On customer acquisition costs, our local grassroots efforts present a high marketing cost per end user initially, which we'll dial down by focusing on employers and an organic growth strategy, ultimately providing the way for a sustainable LTV to CAC ratio of 9 by year 5. Now, our highly scalable digital-only offering allows us to break even by the first quarter of year 3 and hold an EBITDA margin of 52% by year 5. With each active user, our goal is to reduce their carbon footprint to the tune of 15%. Our mock scenario here gives a sample of AlloPoints challenges that could induce or even surpass that goal. Our collective user base over the first 2 years will help us save nearly 24,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions, which equates to roughly 5,000 cars off the road, or applying the social cost of carbon equates to $3 million in social value created directly. Now, this is a highly conservative estimate because it does not factor in the other environmental benefits AlloPoints will induce, such as, say, reduced plastic waste, reduced water footprints, or more informed calls to civil action. In our cycles of iteration, Sloane and I have realized that the true solution to this existential problem is the community of stakeholders taking our environmental issues head-on. Ultimately, that community is what we're building. Our experience and training in economics and psychology help us unblock the key issue of behavioral change in this space. And experience in technology ensures we can follow through on that vision. Our advisors enrich our team with thought leadership and guidance in areas ranging from sustainability to product management. Their advice, as well as our ongoing experience with the Cascadia Accelerator program, will help us will help build on our momentum. To help us onboard nearly 15,000 users in the fight against climate change over the next year, we're raising a pre-seed round today of $350,000, the majority of which will go towards technology and related talent acquisition. It is abundantly clear that the time for climate action is now. The growing AlloPoints community has resoundingly said the time is now for AlloPoints. We hope you join us on this journey, and we'd love to field their questions. Thank you so much. Yes, Rachel.
You didn't talk about content, which I think is probably the most critical. Oh, sorry. Content for your app, which I think is probably the most critical thing to engage your audience. So how are you going to go about building it with speed? Because I do think speed to market and a low barrier to entry project like this is important.
We fully agree. So up here, you see just a sample of the different types of content we have on our various experiments that we've conducted today. It ranges a whole scale all the way from food that we eat, to the transportation that we commute with, to civic action. With this, we're able to provide quick content since we're working with our team of advisors to create. Here you see the full list of challenges. So we have a full list across all these factors, which allows us to work with our advisors and create the list of challenges. Some of these examples include Red Meatless Day, which, for example, lets you skip red meat. We fully, yeah, Alish, can you come?
Yeah, so the other part of this is also we are leveraging our partnerships with organizations at the forefront of sustainability, such as Friends of the Chicago River, to create opportunities that will be hosted on our app for volunteering or education. We're also talking to organizations like Plant Chicago to essentially leverage and bootstrap off the educational content that they have and host them on our app. The other key part here is that our web-based app, which we've already launched, actually hosts the whole list of challenges we have here, and we continuously update these challenges and add more as sort of we do our more research and leverage our base of advisors. Yeah, William.
Thank you for the presentation. Along the same lines on sort of the content, I guess the question is, you're collecting quite a bit of information on individuals between showers, transportation, public volunteering, these sorts of things. Can you talk about how are you leveraging that, if at all, with your partners? So my concern is if I'm Purdue Chicken, I'd be interested in when you're doing No Red Meat Day, so then I can push my ads out in a way that sort of convinces people to buy products. So I'm wondering if there's some connection between the information you're collecting and the business partners that you have, where they're leveraging some of that data for their own sales.
Yeah, for sure. So that's part of the reason why our current business partners are also really excited by what we're offering. The idea is that we're able to provide data both at an aggregate level, but also at an anonymized level, to help them better understand what strategies work in terms of their marketing efforts. Essentially, we're empowering sustainable organizations, such as, say, the Urban Canopy, which is a Chicago-wide composting provider, to help them better understand what could they do to acquire users. Our core thesis here is that there are wonderful businesses and organizations in Chicago and world over that people need to embrace more quickly. Essentially, what we're doing is by connecting end users with them, is by empowering them, both with data, but also direct access to these end users, to more meaningfully essentially reach out to their users, to potential users on our app in terms of growing out their customer base. Yes, Jim.
Leveraging kind of off of what Will had said, you are collecting a tremendous amount of data on individuals. So what's your security in selling that data or reprocessing that data? How are you looking at that? What's your privacy policy to that going forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually partnered with the Law Lab here at the University of Chicago, so we've been following the protocol that they have very generously given us in terms of abiding by legislation, but also we're looking to extend that by not just looking to hit the bare minimum of that. There are the two key stakeholders here. So talking about employees first, one of the first sort of issues that they have raised that we need to cross, especially with the larger organizations, is to demonstrate our ability technologically to protect the user data. And that's partly why we are working towards a beta with some of these larger organizations, and it hasn't converted to full-form letters of intent yet, is because we're essentially working with them to create those capabilities that is aligned with how they essentially partner with third-party applications that they currently facilitate. So we're essentially working with IT specialists and others in these large organizations to figure out how they currently collaborate with these other third-party applications that they use so that we can leverage that knowledge to ensure that we are also sticking to the best standards that some of our other analogs, like, say, Virgin Pulse, do in the employer domain. When it comes to business partners, as I mentioned before, we are leveraging the resources that we currently have, as well as our advisors who have launched products in this space before, to ensure that we are abiding by both legislation, but also hitting by moral standards when it comes to the ethics of data translation. As of now, our goal is to sell aggregated data if we ever come to that stage. So that's sort of how we're currently approaching the data question. Yes, Dasha.
Okay. I have a question about the employer side. So why would an employer choose Allo points instead of benefits around mental health or financial wellness, or even, subsidizing transportation or creating access to public transportation? So that's part one. Part two is, what would an employer need to see to be willing to adopt and renew? Like, what does success look like for them? Yeah. And then I'm going to get greedy. What does your business look like if you aren't successful selling to employers?
So I'll take that. So number one, why would an employer actually work with us? There's two reasons. The first is the simple modal value that Allo Points provides to these employers. Employers are hungry for data that allows them to understand Scope 3 and 4 emissions, and Allo Points provides that specifically on the employees front. That data will be available to employers using a simple back-end dashboard that they'll then be able to use to feed in to their existing net zero suite. Secondly, while we've talked a lot about individual challenges that end users can complete, employers are able to set corporate goals, such as, in this example, being able to track reduction of air miles that they've set for themselves at an aggregate workforce level, and actually publish that and quickly share that with their entire workforce using Allo Points. On the second slide, the second value that we provide is culture. An increasingly talented and engaged workforce is demanding more from their employers on the social corporate side. And a big example of that is on the left here, Ben, one of our advisors. He says many times to us in conversation and publicly in his testimonial that one of the big reasons he's with LinkedIn is because of their focus on sustainability and the tribe that he has formed within his green group. Allo Points allows employers to create that community for their employees and have them be able to engage with each other in a meaningful way. Do you want to take the second part of the question? So for the second part, I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that once more?
Well, there are actually, I think, three parts. But
Yeah.
what does success look like? What does an employer need to see in order to be willing to, pay and renew? And then the other part was just, if you're not successful with employers, what does this business look like? Is that critical to getting the flywheel going, or can you be successful as a kind of consumer sponsorship-based business?
Right, so when we're talking to some of these organizations, so for example, this partly also addresses your first question, which is that organizations like LinkedIn are leveraging what's currently available. For example, Eco Challenge is something that they use during Earth Month as a way of running these initiatives. What Ben and others have said to us, those who have spoken to Green Teams at Lyft, for example, is that they're just not adequate in terms of engagement. People sort of hop off after a few days of it because they're a little gimmicky and it's just not fun. So what we need to prove to them is that we can retain engagement and actually make this more enjoyable than the existing offers in the market. So that's essentially what success looks like for us, is that we're able to retain attention for more than just a few days or even a month. So this is actually sustainable in terms of actually engagement. To your third question, in terms of other revenue opportunities, we cast a wide net during our customer discovery. So the other stakeholders we have spoken with include those in the educational space. So for example, one of our former school's head of sustainability has indicated to us how powerful this could be in terms of essentially taking a Duolingo-like approach in educating students about climate change and sustainability. from our own education experience, as well as talking to, say, our younger cousins and others, options we see in the market, that education quality in this space is really lacking, which is shocking given how relevant this is to our problems and the fact that the future generations will have to be part of the solution, will have to be part of the problem-solving process here. So EdTech is another space we're actively considering. And we already spoke about data, so I won't press on that more. Yeah.
I'm going to go first next time because that was my
Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I was visiting one of my daughters, and I was scraping plates off in the sink to run the disposal, and she ran up to me and said, no, 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 you've got to put all the food in the compost thing.
Yeah.
And the city they live in now has trash and composting and recycling.
Yeah.
And so if a city decides to do that, how does that affect what you're trying to do?
Yeah.
Is it helpful, indifferent, or does it hurt your business model?
Yeah, I can take that. If you don't mind going to the product roadmap. So we fully understand that sustainability looks different for different people based on a whole variety of factors. Geographic zip code essentially is one of them, but it's also things like where they're at, what their acumen is like, what their interest is like, and so on. We take all of that into account when providing recommendations of challenges. And you can see that here in the personalization column at the top left. We'll be requesting a personalization questionnaire at the beginning where we collect information on the specific attributes of that person, and we'll also be taking localized recommendations into account, for which there's actually a lot of APIs that exist in the market today that, for example, in the case of your daughter, if she types in her zip code, she will not see composting pickup services as part of her recommendations. But to answer the second part of your question, does this help us? Yes, it does. Because at the end of the day, our job is not necessarily to have people complete these, buy things off of our social commerce app just to buy them. It's to drive that social impact. So we would have two types of challenges where you're both tracking completion of composting through the municipality provisions or through the composting pickup services that we would provide in, say, the case of Chicago where it's needed.
Thank you.
And this actually adds to our value proposition, which is, again, that even from the public sector or the private sector, there are a lot of solutions at our disposal. For example, taking public transport to this very event, right? So that's already on offer. But the thing is that engagement isn't as high as it should be from the public. So where we really see ourselves in the future as well in partnering with cities is in getting more people excited about, say, taking public transport, which we know is easier said than done. But so, for example, if that also means composting initiatives citywide, that also means that we can educate. So we can also support your daughter in educating you, for example, about how to compost. And especially with composting, for example, there are things that you should compost, there are things you shouldn't. So essentially, we can facilitate that educational role as well in these partnerships. Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. Can you talk about your confidence in Can you talk about your confidence in the price per employee that you're talking about with employers? And do the LOIs that you have with the two partners in process include that price point?
So we are pretty confident about the pricing that we've done because it's benchmarked against one of our competitors, EarthUp. EarthUp actually only provides a fairly basic employee user application that is largely around completing or tracking completion of challenges and doesn't provide the wide host of partnerships and product and service integrations that we do. And so our benchmark is comparable to what's industry standards. We have also run this specific price point against partners at different firms who would potentially be interested in using this application. While this price point was not part of the discussion for the two specific letters of intent that you see, they have been part of the conversations with the larger discovery conversations we've had with larger firms.
Just confirming that you both are going to be staying on with the enterprise?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. The only issue we're trying to, because both of us are internationals here on the H-1B visa, so we're talking to advisors, especially former YC founders from an international background, to essentially navigate that process because it's quite difficult and it requires legal and experiential acumen. So we're essentially building informal advisors who can guide us through that process. But the long and short of it is yes, and we've been building all of this despite, like, in addition to our full-time jobs, and we'll be continuing to doing that until that opportunity opens, which part of it is also the capital opening that up, because as internationals, the way in which we can essentially work for our own firm is by essentially having some capital, essentially.
Okay, we are out of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have now a short break. We will resume with the next pitch at 10:45. Okay, our next team is Apprendi.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rex. This is Sam and my wife, Micah, and we are three of the co-founders of Apprendi, which is a platform for creating and managing visual content used for child therapy. So this first point might not come as a surprise to many in this room, especially if there are any parents in here today, but maintaining a child's attention can be incredibly challenging, especially if you're trying to do that in a highly structured environment like school or therapy. And that challenge is felt even more acutely by practitioners who work to support children with mental health disorders like autism. And so to navigate through that challenge, practitioners today rely on visual aids to interact with kids. And visual aids, there's evidence that supports their use. Over the last 30 years, the evidence supports what a lot of parents and practitioners have known intuitively for quite some time, that visual aids are helpful to keeping kids engaged and facilitate learning. And so despite their relevance, though, and their importance, creating visual aids is a difficult process to do today. And so I first came to understand that this was a problem when observing Micah, who's a doctoral student in clinical psychology, struggle with the time that it was taking to put together visual content to use for a kiddo she was working with who's on the autism spectrum. And after almost 50 conversations since, we found that that experience was not something that was unique to her, but that was very commonly shared, and that frustration was commonly felt. And so in synthesizing those conversations that we had, we identified three themes that emerged. The first is that the current tools right now are time-consuming and offer a really poor user experience, so poor, in fact, that it actually prevents practitioners from creating the visual content that they would like to create. Second is that the current tools lack diversity and personalization. And then lastly, there's limited collaboration and sharing in the current system. Practitioners are often forced to operate in silos, have limited visibility into what their colleagues are creating, and that leads to a lot of duplicative and repetitive work. And so in all of these conversations, there were so many learnings, but we pulled one interview quote from a speech language pathologist because it was really, really helpful to illustrate the tension that we found between this desire to create more visual aids, recognizing that they're effective, but the limited ability to do so right now because the current tools prevent that from being done easily. And so to provide a little bit more context regarding those current tools, we've identified a few screenshots from Boardmaker, which is a leading tool on the market today. And Boardmaker first came to the market in 1980, and they've benefited from very limited competition in the space. And so for us, we've identified this space as being ripe for disruption, and we believe that in facilitating that disruption, it's important for us to prioritize on these three strategic goals that come out of those interview conversations that we had. And so how do we actually execute on those different goals? We've included a few screenshots that illustrate what it would look like as a practitioner going into Apprendi to use our platform. So when we talk about reducing the time that it takes to create visuals, we're talking about improving the experience for actually finding child-friendly images through predictive search that uses the text that a practitioner writes into the image to actually generate content for that individual. We're also talking about really embracing and using templates with more frequency. When we think about personalization, we want practitioners to have the ability to actually create avatars that look like the kids that they're presenting these visuals to, so that the kid can see themselves in the content that they're being shown. We also really want to make it easier for practitioners to embed real-life images into the visual content that they create. That was something that came up over and over again in our conversations. And then lastly, we've talked about this siloed nature of content sharing between practitioners, but there's also a real challenge in sharing information from the practitioner to the caregiver. And so the way that we tackle that is that we have practitioners store their information in a child-specific folder. Access to that folder can then be shared with parents, and they have all their child's content in a centralized location.
Thanks, Rex. You missed a layup. There's really hard to find images of kids on crutches today in some of these tools. So I feel that very personally myself. But we're really thrilled to be tackling this problem in large part because there's a really compelling commercial opportunity that we see in this space. It's about an $800 million market from our estimation today in the United States, growing to over $1 billion in the next 5 years. It's really focused on serving our core stakeholders, which are practitioners, parents, and caregivers of kids with mental health disorders. but that market's really big. There's a lot of stakeholders there, and so we want to be focused in our approach. We think that the autism community is the best place for us to start, both because of the importance that visuals play in delivering therapy today, but also because of this incredible increase in demand for care, evidenced by a 240+% increase in autism diagnostic rates over the last 20 years. So who is actually serving these kids? Well, there's a number of different practitioners. You can see some of them here on the left. In order to find an ideal customer, we thought about it in two ways. One, who's making the most complex visuals today and who's making visuals most frequently? We see speech-language pathologists as our ideal customer because their need for Apprendi is most salient today. Now, not only is that need part of the reason for them being a really great foundation for our business, but it's also because of the clinical settings that we find them in. They're mostly in private clinical settings, private enterprises, which from our interviews we know translates to higher willingness to pay and willingness to try new tools. So we're going to think about similar profiles as we expand, things like people like ABA therapists and clinical psychologists. Now, on that baseline, once we've learned from those users and built a really strong foundation, we think that that positions us really well to leverage that and expand into public enterprises to tap into the large pool of special education teachers also serving kids in this space. From there, we'll have the community and the content required to deliver value directly to parents and caregivers supporting kids with autism and all other mental health disorders. Now, there's a question of how do we actually access these people? And we think that a bottom-up approach targeting individual practitioners is the most effective way for us to build scale. It's for three primary reasons. One, most importantly, individuals are the ones feeling this pain today. They're the ones that feel this most saliently. Two, sharing and search, core parts of their process already. So we can position ourselves strategically within that to facilitate the discovery of our tool. And third, and important as we think about expanding into the enterprise, is practitioners today already are really excited and willing to advocate for the tools and products that they believe in. So it provides us with a really warm introduction into these enterprises to help also take some of the burden of paying off of the individual practitioners over time. Now, all that's going to require a really robust customer acquisition engine, and we see 4 distinct channels as being our primary means of getting in touch with these people. We're going to leverage the networks that already exist across this space. Things like really well-established professional associations hosting well-attended conferences and the like, where we can get in front of large numbers of people really quickly. But also novel approaches, like university partnerships, where we can put Apprendi in the hands of new practitioners so they can take us into their new jobs wherever they go, either in this country or abroad. Emerging from all of that, we see a really attractive, exciting commercial profile for our business in its early days. Apprendi is a subscription software model, which means really highly attractive unit economics for a single practitioner. So at a $15 per month price point, we see 82% contribution margins per individual, an LTV to CAC ratio of 6.5, and a year 5 EBITDA margin approaching 50%, all with a really long runway for us to grow, as we've only projected to penetrate 2% of that market that we showed you just a few slides ago. Now, obviously, that's not the only reason why we're up here. Right? We see an incredible opportunity for Apprendi to make a difference in the lives of over 340,000 kids who will be using and benefiting from our platform in our 5th year. We're also thrilled for the chance to sponsor clinical research to evaluate the impacts on things like child engagement, overall patient outcomes, as well as practitioner burnout. Now, we're thrilled about everything we just told you about what the near-term vision for Apprendi looks like, but if we think bigger and think to the long term, we actually think there's a much larger opportunity here. And it's based on a very simple premise, which is that visual stories can help children better understand the world around them. If you believe that to be true, like we do, then every parent and every child should have access to high-quality, personalized, clinically inspired visual stories to help them navigate the transitions and the new life experiences that they face every day. Things like going to the dentist, transitioning to a new school, or even navigating a global pandemic.
So, as Sam conveyed, we're extremely excited about this opportunity, and we think we have got the right team to execute on that. We're comprised of 3 MBA students, myself, Rodwa out of Stanford, and then Sam as well, who flew across the country to be with us here. And then Micah, who has really strong domain knowledge. and Liz, who's a master's student in computer science at Stanford as well. But not only do we have a really strong core team, we've got a really vibrant community of advisors who are committed to our success. The advisor team is comprised of practitioners making these visuals day in and day out, and also business and medical professionals to help us navigate those respective terrains as we move forward. So today, our initial ask is for $350,000. And if we're fortunate enough to raise funding here today, that would go directly toward our product development costs and would also contribute to giving us the credibility we need to go and raise funding elsewhere. And so, on a final note, we wanted to end by reiterating the fact that Apprendi, our goal is really to help individuals. And we spoke with one practitioner, Shelley, throughout the course of our process. And really, our goal is to help empower her to build better visual aids faster so that she can be a better support to the individuals and kids in her life, like Olivia, who rely on her to navigate a very complicated world for them. So we're so grateful to be here. Thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to any questions. Yes. Oh, yeah, sorry, I can't see the names, but yes.
So I'll start. So there are free models like Canva and Visme and others. Is the difference you guys are saying is just that those don't have like kid-friendly content, and so your pitch is we're that, but free, you pay to get the free kid-friendly content? Is that the?
Yeah, so it is like, there's definitely similarities with Canva, right? The easy approach to graphic design is definitely the clear draw there. There's an emphasis on the assets that are used in our tool, right, that are purpose-built for therapy. And when you're working with kids, you're working with very unique circumstances and different stories that you have to kind of convey to help the child understand their world. So the assets in particular and being able to manipulate those with ease is really important. Canva has a lot of other ancillary tools that I think kind of cloud the focus for us, but also around like collaboration and sharing with caregivers. There are requirements around HIPAA to be compliant there that we would be able to deliver on, or where Canva might not be able to. Yeah, anything to add there?
The only thing I would add is that there's we covered it quickly, but the community aspect of this is really important. As we think about this business, right, this product is in a lot of ways a large network that therapists don't have access to today. And so you might be able to create something that looks beautiful on Canva, but if I wanted to share it with somebody else who could then edit it quickly for the patients that they're working with, that's not really facilitated all that easily. And if we think about this, as more people build in Apprendi, the experience gets better. So for the millionth person that's on here, it's way better than it is for the 100th, right? And so that kind of snowball is really important to building this business, because the content, like we said, those templates that we referenced, it's unique to these therapeutic settings.
Yeah. Yes.
Who owns the imagery? So if I design something that's wildly successful for you, it just gets wildly successful for you? Who controls sort of the design and the content of the imagery?
Yeah, it's a great question. We thought about this a couple different ways. I mean, on the one hand, there's so much customization that has to go into these things, and so it's rare that you know, William, would be able to build something and I would just pick it up perfectly off the shelf. It's actually part of the problem we're trying to solve. And so it's a little bit of, yeah, you might lay the foundation, but I would tweak almost anything that you built today. We thought about models, and these ideas are becoming popular of ownership at the individual level. We've thought about models of royalty sharing or things of that nature, where if you wanted to opt into that version of our membership, you could do that. It is going to be really important for us to have what's the right word? Champions within the product who do drive a lot of the content creation. But at the end of the day, we see this as more of it's a collaborative community of people. This isn't necessarily something that people are looking to make money off of. And we haven't heard a lot of, we've almost heard resistance to that idea of commercializing these tools that really benefit kids. It's more about an excitement to be able to share what they're working on today.
Yeah, and even though Apprendi would have that content within it, there's an element of potentially reputation building for the individual who creates content that then becomes the inspiration for a lot of follow-on work. So we think there are a few different angles that we can play out there that would be very interesting. Yes?
Can you just say a little bit more about the impact? So how important, no doubt that it's nice for a kid to have something personalized for them. How important is that personalization for impact on children? What's the evidence on that? And then second question, on the, in terms of the teacher networks, there are a lot, as I understand it, of teacher networks out there where they're sharing curricula or teacher aids. Why aren't practitioners, why aren't clinicians using those same sort of teacher aids to share what they're making now?
Yeah, so a lot of good stuff there. I want to tackle it maybe in 3 buckets. So the first being kind of broad impact, then like the evidence around the effects of personalization, and then lastly, the other marketplaces that are there for curricula. So specific to kind of the broader impact, we have 3 stakeholders that are benefiting from our tool. Most directly, it's practitioners, then we have caregivers, and then the children themselves. So for practitioners, a quick point of note is right now there's a huge supply and demand imbalance, and practitioners in particular are under significant stress. Rates of burnout for mental health practitioners in 2021 were higher than they were for physicians. So during COVID, so it's really a significant problem. And so we believe that addressing a core area of pain and just improving that process for them can really have a dramatic effect on burnout, and that there are really significant social implications there. Quickly on the caregiver point, right now information is shared via email or printouts. And caregivers who have a young kiddo with a mental health disorder, their life they've got enough things to juggle. So providing them with a centralized location where they can go back and find the tools that were helpful and useful in a therapy setting, and then use those and find them at home when something comes up again, we think can really impact the stress levels there, and that would be very impactful. And then kids, benefiting directly from this personalization point. The scientific research is a little bit sparse here, and that's because when you're doing research on therapeutic practices, it's much easier to kind of test very standardized approaches. And so by this very nature of increased personalization, it's not extremely standardized, right? And this is something that we think we're in a good position to run clinical trials for, right? We could even do a randomized controlled trial within our tool. Some kids maybe don't get the personalized images, and this helps give a whole new perspective on how to treat and work with kids. What we do know is that representation matters, right? And so we know that more broadly. I think that our hypothesis is that that representation will matter here as well. And then really quickly, I know I've gone on here for a little bit, but those other marketplaces that exist, you can get access to the different curriculum, but a lot of that is PDF form, right? There are a few different reasons, but one core one is that you'd have to buy it most of the time, and then it's very difficult to edit, and there's always a lot of individual level customization here. So it's just really difficult to do, and people just make stuff from scratch because it's faster.
Could you explain more that you said that it was an $800 million market? I've got a couple questions here. Would you explain what that market is? Who is that that's in that market?
Yeah.
And how you would attack them? And is most of your revenue coming from practitioners? Or you said that people who had these kids would refer to it too. Are you expecting individual parents to become subscribers?
Yeah.
And then also, would you speak about the stickiness of your team?
Sorry, just to clarify the last one. Stickiness of the team or of the?
Of your team. I mean, of going forward.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. I can take the first one. Thank you, Chris, for that. The market itself, to be very explicit, those bubbles that we saw early on, the expanding kind of segments there, they correspond directly to those different segments that we showed in the boxes as they build up. So there's a practitioner element of this, right? Speech language pathologists, clinical psychologists like Micah, school teachers, right? And that makes up kind of a core portion of this. Then there's also parents and caregivers of the autism-specific community, which is, again, as we think about being focused at the launch, that's a core set of stakeholders that we want to build for, right? Serve really well. And then the broader market that we think we can impact is also any parent, right? At least in the early days, any parent who has a child who's working through a mental health disorder, whether diagnosed or not, these kids can benefit from visuals to help them navigate the things that they're feeling and learning. The specific assumptions that underlie that, practitioners are, like we said, $15 a month. Parents and caregivers, we've actually priced in a slightly lower price point because, again, we recognize that that's a little bit more of a consumer play. we can talk, I'll pause, we can talk in more detail of the different avenues we actually see, things around fringe benefits to get parents access as part of an enterprise approach, but those are the two different kind of primary buckets, practitioners and parents. We're thinking about them a little bit differently, but we see the benefits being very closely tied together. I'll pause. Does that, I think, answer the first? Rex, you want to talk?
Yeah, I'd love to chime in here.
Yeah.
We also pulled up the expectations around, Sam touched on it. Initially, we're a productivity business, right? We're solving this problem of making these visuals faster for practitioners. And so our assumptions in the model are built around that. You can see year 1 and year 2, we're basically not assuming any revenue that comes through these. You have a child 1 week who is afraid of something or is trying a new experience, really difficult for them, then they've got something else a few weeks later, right? So you build up this library over time, and then if you ever want to go back and edit the templates that you've made in the past, you need to be a paying subscriber to the tool. You could extract PDFs, potentially. We're playing around with that. But that's an element of stickiness. We also think the network effects that Sam mentioned as well create a stickiness component here. If we leverage the piece around like having a reputational component here where this person had X other practitioners benefit from the content that they built, and that was the foundation for additional work, we think that there's stickiness in the network effect as well. And then, I'm sorry, on the team question. So we're really excited about our team. I'm a second-year MBA. I have a job lined up in the fall. And quite frankly, I graduate on Saturday. I'm working full-time on this on Monday. So the plan is to really lean in, and hopefully if we're able to get enough traction so that I don't have to start that job in the fall, that would be ideal. Recognizing that life doesn't always work out exactly according to plan, that we're building the MVP, we're starting to get it out in the market and get feedback on it, and I'll hand it off to Sam here as well on that.
Yeah, just for the rest of the team, Rex aside, I'm Radwa and myself, both at Stanford first years. We're lucky to have the opportunity to essentially, the way the program's structured, to be able to work on this effectively full-time in our second year. That's the current plan. And really, as excited as I am to be able to do that, I think the Stanford Network has already shown that it provides a ton of benefits for us, both on the venture side of things for fundraising, but also the told for us, and we pulled her in part because she was available, in part because she's really passionate about this. And so we're really excited about kind of balancing those networks. The goal is that next spring, all of us, the whole team is full-time. We've raised more money. We've proven product market fit, and I think we can do that. We're well positioned to do that, kind of, regardless of what happens in the next 6 to 8 months.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank you. Just like that mute button. Thank you for the presentation. I think you have a very simple business model. It's really easy to understand. Thank you for that. What % productivity or efficiency do you think you bring to the practitioners?
That is a great question, and that is something that when we have more robust data, that would be a lot easier to answer. Our goal has been improving productivity by 66%. That's been the goal. We think it can take a third of the time that it does today. There are a few categories of visuals that are the more complicated ones, and that we think some tweaks to how those are developed, they're called social stories, they're just a little bit more in depth. And we think that the tweaks there could really translate to those types of gains. But that is certainly something that we're looking to build more robust data on.
And just to put that in perspective, right, even if you're cutting 3 hours out of a practitioner's work week, if they're billing somewhere between $50 and $75 an hour, being reimbursed, as we heard earlier, at around those rates, like the value proposition to this is pretty easy, I think, for us to understand. And when we've pitched it that way to practitioners, it's been very straightforward. But that question is, if we could cut it, by an order of magnitude, that'd be even better.
Exactly.
But that's what we think is realistic.
Yes.
Can you defend your funding request? Because I don't think you can build anything that you could be selling to a practitioner for $250,000.
So, running out of time at the right time. The funding request, and I can flip back to that, It's based around.
I would just say I think it's a great idea too. So.
Okay, we'll take that. But the funding request, because we do have Rodwa who has technical experience, and we also do have Liz, they're not costing money at this time. There are plenty of benefits from SNVC as far as like AWS hosting costs, just broader reductions in our costs across the board that we factored in here. We have calculated like the initial asset acquisition cost to build out our initial library, and Bill here should be able to speak a little bit more directly to some of the way we've lined up the technical costs. Yeah, anything I missed or to add there?
No, I think the big thing is, like, I wish Rodwa were here. She's an absolute rock star. Liz is great. Hi, Rodwa. They're both like incredible technical minds, and so we've already gotten off to a great start. The goal is like buy what we need to early on so we can move quickly and iterate quickly, right? This is not about having a perfectly polished product on day one to launch. It's about tapping into the network of dozens of people who we've spoken with who are like itching to get this in their hands, learning from them, building with them, and eventually over time reinvesting any small amounts we do get back into that development. But again, Rodwa could defend it better than we could. The development of the core technology is not actually as hard as you might think.
Okay, we are out of time. Thank you very much. Okay, our next team is TechPass.
Thanks, Rob.
Good morning. My name is Alina Agarwal, and this is my colleague, Jalen Tucker, and we are thrilled to tell you about TechPass today. TechPass solves the diversity recruiting pipeline issue in tech. Today, companies are scrambling to recruit diverse tech candidates using old and new tools like LinkedIn and Handshake, and yet less than 5% of the nation's tech workforce is Black or brown. And we know that the majority of companies have actually increased their spending towards diversity recruiting as recently as 2021. So despite all of this energy on this space, clearly we are not solving the problem. What's going on? Well, the majority of solutions focus in on the point of employment, which means that they miss the myriad of opportunities that come before then. Things like Product Management 101 classes or speaking at a student event are great opportunities to connect students and employers well before the job search begins. And in fact, that is how diversity recruiting is done well, especially in tech. Because in tech, we know that 71% of Black and brown students who are interested in the field leave the major before their junior year, citing things like a lack of guidance or a lack of network, to leave the field well before their job search. And younger students know there is an unwritten code to getting into tech that not everybody has. That's where we come in. TechPass provides guided roadmaps to underrepresented talent seeking their first job in tech, connecting them with employers along the way. Now, TechPass is a real live app. Students are using it and our companies are too. But to give you a sense of the student experience, we've taken some screenshots. So first, a student creates a profile, telling us a little bit about themselves. Second, they're taken to this page, their Pathways page. That's comprised of milestones and activities that gives them that step-by-step guide into their first job. These milestones and activities come from an experiment that I ran about a year and a half ago now, connecting 170 students and 13 companies for summer internships. So as a student clicks on these activities, like let's say joining a hackathon, they're asked to reflect on those experiences, much like they would do in an interview. As students fill this out, they are shown companies with whom they match the current skill set of on the right-hand side. And when they're ready for job search, they can see all of the companies that are on TechPass. And upon selecting an individual one, dive into the culture of that workforce like they're looking for. And when that student's ready, they can directly connect with a recruiter at that firm. Now, because of this student engagement, we collect unique data that nobody else has. So without TechPass, using current platforms, the relationship between a student and an employer is transactional. And the main piece of data that flows back and forth is the resume. But with TechPass, students engage much more deeply and tell us much more about those experiences, giving us much more data and making better connections for those employers. So students get that guidance, they get that network from us, and thus we increase the likelihood of them joining the workforce, increasing diversity, and increasing the wealth creation opportunities available to that student. We are working with channel partners to get those students onto our platform. So Illinois Tech and UIC is whom we've worked with so far, with a list of future colleges there for you. And importantly, we're going student club by student club, because we really want to make sure that we meet diverse tech students where they're at. And interestingly, career services and groups like the National Society of Black Engineers see us as a supplement to the guides that they have for their students, and that makes them really great channel partners for us as well. On the employer side, they really appreciate that we can bring more diverse candidates to the top of their recruitment funnel and increase conversion rates through that funnel because of the earlier relationships and targeted branding opportunities. Here, too, we're working with channel partners. The main one is P33 Chicago. So P33 Chicago is a nonprofit that was started by the former US Secretary of Commerce, Penny Pritzker, and is focused on boosting the tech ecosystem of the city. And actually, they've de-risked a lot of the early days of TechPass. They formed the initial investment to build out our MVP. They've opened their doors to their Tech Talent Alliance of over 50 tech employers in the region, many of whom are our customers today. And for future scale, we plan to go tech hub by tech hub, leveraging these groups in other areas of the country. And today we've got great traction. There's 13 companies that are in our free pilot right now, and over 120 students from the 2 schools I mentioned alone. We're learning a great deal in this pilot. We know that students love the roadmap. They love the direct connection to recruiters, and they are willing to tell us information that nobody else has. For example, the average student on TechPass today completes 9 of the activities on that pathway that I showed you. And with companies, we're learning what it is they need to reap the full benefit of being on TechPass. So today we're hearing things like about 3 hires per year makes them feel that TechPass provides something that others cannot. From here, I'll pass it on to my colleague Jalen to tell us about the market.
Thank you so much. And so the US online recruiting market is just under $15 billion, and it's continuously growing. And so we're looking at companies that want to hire diverse tech talent and also are sizable enough to have a college recruiting team. And so our serviceable addressable market is just over $750 million. And so we think that TechPass can capture 3.5% of this market. And we understand we're not the only ones within the space. With our emphasis on tech and also truly understanding our students' experiences puts us in a niche where we have valuable insights and will be a strong complement to the products and services already out there today, like Handshake. And so we will not charge students for this platform, and our price point reflects our complementary approach. We're going to remove any financial barriers of entry for our student success, and on the employer side, we're going to charge an average of $2,500 per month, which is less than what is charged for LinkedIn and Handshake and well within most HR budgets. And our pricing point is on a tiered model that's going to depend on the company size. And so we have calculated the cost of acquiring a customer in steady state to be $530. We're going to use a direct sales strategy and a bottoms-up approach, understanding how much time it will take for our staff to make that sale in steady state. Over expected lifetime of 3 years, and with those companies paying an average of $2,500 per month, we're gonna have an LTV of $90,000. Subtracting our cost, COGS, and customer success, we're gonna have a contribution margin of around $89,000, which a portion will be used to drive student growth on the platform in 3 ways. Individual outreach, which we're actively doing right now. Marketing, which we're going to begin doing in the upcoming academic year. And finally, data sourcing, which you already began running tests on 2 weeks ago. And so within 5 years, we're confident about reaching an annual revenue of $28 million with 935 companies on the platform. And I've had the pleasure of working with these phenomenal individuals and wanted to take a time to introduce the founding team who have been together from the start. Jose has years of experience within the diversity, equity, and inclusion space at Microsoft. He actually led the startup studio that TechPass was founded in. And he believed in Lena and her ideas so much so that he wanted to join as the executive chairman. Tyler is our technical powerhouse who actually built the TechPass platform. He has experience working in successful startups and also has a deep understanding in machine learning. Alina, our fearless CEO, has experience within workforce development and tech ecosystems and has focused her career on the advancement of equity within tech. And I have been working on TechPass this quarter. And in undergrad, I was the student that needed a platform like TechPass. Since then, I have acquired experience within the National Society of Black Engineers and also the ed tech space. We also have an amazing executive advisory board who has a wealth of knowledge within HR and who is currently helping us dive more deep into understanding the product market fit on the employer side, which is what we're focused on today. From our student customer interviews, we understand the value add of TechPass. And as we look to convert our 13 customers into paid long-term subscribers, we're looking within each HR department to understand who are those decision makers to make that ask in the upcoming academic year. And TechPass is also built to scale. Since we are a web platform, we can reach students where they are, all across the country. And on the employer side, with our direct sales approach, we're going to expand Tech Hub by Tech Hub, with our top 3 locations being Newark, LA, and Denver, because of the size and strength of their tech sector. And after proving market fit in Chicago, we are going to expand to these other tech sectors with our strategic partnership, our sales and marketing, and also our data enrichment. And so right now, we're seeking a $500,000 investment in TechPass to boost the employer experience on the platform, to increase the number of students, and also to grow our team and capabilities. With your help, we can change the face of tech and solve the recruiting diversity pipeline issue. Thank you for your time, and we're going to open the floor for questions now.
experience, it seems that the problem is earlier than college, that once a student gets into college, they kind of know that they're going to go into data science or engineering or something like that. And so have you thought about, that audience, either juniors in high school or younger, and can you just speak to that?
Yeah, great question. Absolutely. The journey into tech, some say, starts as early as third grade math lessons. And we know that that pipeline is incredibly important from grade school to middle school to high school and onwards. But we also know that if that last mile of the pipeline is broken, particularly for Black and brown students, then we're not setting any of those students up for success earlier. So for that reason, we've chosen to focus in on the college student timeframe, and that's particularly who employers are excited to work with. And as recent as last week, started talking with a couple organizations that do focus in on the younger population who might be able to use this as a roadmap to help those students, even if they're not necessarily looking for employer connections that early on. Thank you. Please.
I was wondering why you picked tech. There are a lot of other industries, like the financial industry, that could benefit from something like this as well. Why technology, and are there plans to expand into other areas too?
Yeah, great question. Jalen, do you mind going to, I think, 4B? Great, thank you. So the reason that we've chosen tech is because this is the fastest growing industry with brilliant wealth creation jobs in particular. Those jobs, you can see on that graph there, data analytics and software engineering in particular, are the ones that companies expect to be growing the fastest over the next 3 years. And often those wages right out of college start at $100,000 per year. So to fulfill our social mission, we're really focused on those wealth creation opportunities, and we want to make sure that we get students into where we see the future going, into roles that we think that are absolutely obtainable. And so when you look at some of those other industries that are on that page, like cloud computing is one that comes up, or tech sales is another one that we've considered. I think those are on the roadmap, but later down, because right now we're really focused in on those two, as employers are saying that's where they feel the biggest need for diversity hires. Thanks. Please.
To that, to both of those questions, it seems like medical technology, so not operating computers and computer systems, but computers that do other things, would be a really good adjacency here. And I know from talking with my friend Don Thompson, I don't know if you know Don or talked to him, that getting the kids in junior high and high school are really important, as Rachel just said. So I think those are things to consider. I really like this. I know there's an issue. I liked seeing CDW up on there. I don't know if you did that for me, because I was a former CEO. And you have two Purdue engineers that are both with MBAs on the panel you'll judge as well, judging. So good luck. You're off to a good start.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Please, Sunny.
So just full disclosure, I'm on a board of an organization called UpKey, which is very similar. It's broader. It's not just tech. It's it's for any kid, diverse background. Usually in schools that companies don't traditionally recruit from, the UICs, things like that, because a lot of the diverse talent goes to those schools. Mm-hmm. What they've struggled with, and they've been around for a while, and they've got 100,000 kids on their platform, was that sort of tension between the dual-sided. You got to have enough students that the companies want to pay for accessing them, but you've got to have enough companies that the students want to spend the time. How do you think about that in terms of your go-to-market?
Yeah, great question, Sunny. Welcome to my perennial battle that is happening in my mind at all times. I'm familiar with UpKey.
So back to the social impact of this. When we look at the 71% that drop out of tech, what happens to them? So what is their eventual destination? And then of the 29% that did stay in tech, are they finding a particular difficulty in getting jobs that is worse than the larger pool of people who are graduating with tech degrees? And so looking at both of those two things?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's not specific data on what happens to those 71%. It includes dropping out of school, it includes dropping out of the major, it includes switching to another major. So it's a little bit difficult to determine. But in individually interviewing those people and just getting a chance to hear their own story, what I hear is that they say, this doesn't really seem like the place for me. Or like, I don't know, there was a student named Fabiola who was talking to me out of her childhood bedroom. It was painted Barbie pink. And she was telling me how much she loved numbers. And she was a freshman. And I was like, you're gonna be great. You have this whole set of future opportunities ahead of you in data analytics. Let me tell you the companies. I'm so excited to chat with you. And she said, oh, but I left my quant major. And I asked her why. And she said that, I just felt like I didn't know what was happening around me. I didn't know what the set path was. But being a math teacher, there's a set path to go into that. And I'm so happy for her to go into being a math teacher. And yet it's that exact problem that we're seeing where nobody told her what she should be doing to get into data analytics. And in talking to the 29% who do make it, they often cite knowing somebody, so somebody who tapped them on the shoulder and said, hey, Bruce, go do this your junior year. You need an internship because that's your golden ticket into a job. Or somebody who, oftentimes that's a relative or a cousin or somebody like that. And in a few great instances, it's a senior at that school that they knew really well. But what we see with Black and brown students is that they often lack those networks because there are so few Black and brown students in tech that they end up leaving so early. Please.
On that last point, can you say a little bit more about how the networking works with this? What's the personal element? What's the networking outside of just the connection to the companies?
Yeah, so the connection to the company is one of the main ones. And then beyond that, the third bucket milestone is building a network. And so the activities on that part of the pathway are connect with 3 recruiters, find a mentor, and then suggesting questions that they use in order to find those and linking them out to other resources to be able to find those individuals. So we see we really see TechPass as enabling human connection, not trying to replace it, but provide it where students feel lost so that they can feel more confident in what they're doing. Well, please.
One last question, and this is around sort of feedback loops. So how are you, someone gets hired, are you checking in 30, 60, 90 days to kind of see how things are going? When someone leaves, maybe after 120, you're trying to figure out what was wrong, just some of that sort of feedback for both the employer and for your business.
Absolutely. So right now, that feedback loop is me. And in the future, what we're doing is building out the employer interface of this so we can more regularly access that information at scale. And that, in the cost breakdown, there was a section of customer success. We realize that this will be somewhat hands-on. It's not your typical SaaS model, nor do we want it to be. And so we expect that type of integration with that employer, that interface, just checking in, seeing how things are going, to happen regularly.
And now we're really out of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. TechPass judges, fill out your feedback forms, and then you're welcome to join us for lunch in 219. Everyone else will be back here at 12:45. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Just a couple of things, a reminder to the judges. I've been asked to remind you, turn on the mics, turn off the mics when you're not speaking. Just as I introduce our next team, I just want to let everyone know we're going to allow 5 extra minutes for the Q&A because we have the interpreters here. And with that, I'd like to introduce our next team, Mazaru.
Have you ever imagined a day in the life of people with disabilities? Jason is our founder. He was born deafblind with some useful vision and limited hearing. To have such a normal day, Jason relies on a diverse pool of support providers to accommodate his disabilities. I'm one of his primary providers. However, when I'm not available, Jason has to find someone else to accommodate his needs, and that's not easy. It takes days or even weeks to find the providers for him, and he has to deal with that every single day. But he's not alone. 61 million adults in the United States live with disabilities. They are facing similar challenges. Without having access to support providers, it's incredibly difficult for them, to live an independent and a fulfilling life. And that's why we're here. Mazaru is an inclusive online platform matching people with disabilities with freelance online